Right, everyone. Thank you and welcome to GHHI's EPA Region 3 Environmental Justice Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program webinar. My name is Sarah Fai and I am a Program Officer for Thriving Communities. And I just wanted to go over the housekeeping slide with you all. So for questions, if you could please post your questions, not in the chat, but in the Q&A section, which you will find in the same ribbon as the chat. So again, questions in the Q&A section, please. Participants are muted during the webinar, so kindly use the chat for any other interactions. If you have technical assistance, you can send a message in the chat or email thrivingcommunities@ghhi.org. Also, the webinar is being recorded and will be shared with all the participants after the event. The presentation materials and the PowerPoint deck will be made available after the webinar, and contact information if you have follow-up questions after the webinar, feel free to email us at thrivingcommunities@ghhi.org. And now I am going to introduce Ruth Ann Norton, who is the President and CEO of GHHI, as well as our lead for the Thriving Communities Initiative.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm so glad to be here with all of you. And I want to, first, I want to thank our wonderful and growing Thriving Communities team led by Abby Kofsky, Sarah Fai, Dawn Sanders, and Melita Nagalwe. And also thank support from Beth Bingham from our comms team. We are delighted and thrilled to be on the cusp of offering over $40 million of funding to build capacity at the community level for environmental justice and to advance equity and capacity building where we know solutions are at the community level. I'm also deeply honored to welcome one of our Thriving Communities Advisory Board leads, Latricia Adams, who is the president and CEO of Young, Gifted, and Green. Many of you may know the organization as Black Millennials for Flint, is just a force in the world of environmental justice and also serves on the White House Council for Environmental Justice. Thank you, Latricia, and thank you for kicking us off this morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Ruth Ann. Good morning, everyone. I am so honored to speak today about the critical role that the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative has played and will continue to play with supporting grassroots EJ organizations like ours. And while they are the ideal leader for this new venture with EPA's new Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program. For decades at this point, GHHI has been a pillar in the environmental justice movement, a phenomenal ally, providing vital support to community-based organizations working on issues such as lead abatement, healthy homes assessments, environmental health education. The list goes on and on. Their mission is simply to break the link between unhealthy housing with unhealthy families and creating equity which starts inside of the home. Our own organization is a prime example of how impactful GHHI support can be. We started years ago, even though I'm still very youthful, but very young, starting in this movement as Black millennials that were very upset and concerned and organized around the issues that were going on in Flint, Michigan, but realized those same issues impact Black and Brown communities across the country. It was with the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative that we got our first access to funding. These were 20-something-year-olds that were very much so concerned about what was going on in the environment, and we're still grateful to this day to have that foundational support with the Green and Healthy Homes Initiative. Through this phenomenal program with EPA, we see that this will be the launch with funding to support community-based organizations, very similar to organizations like ours. I will also be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that this support that they provide with JHHI goes way beyond just grant making. They have historically provided us with technical experts, provided us with support to support our initiatives and programs on the ground, providing support with data tracking, a myriad of resources that are very essential to upstanding capacity building with community-based organizations. I just want to say thank you to Ruth Ann, the entire Green and Healthy Homes Initiative staff for your steadfast support. I'm excited about this new journey and being able to expand our work throughout the region and get to the finish line, to the golden star, which is environmental justice for all. And I'm so excited as we move forward in this unprecedented investment with this administration. And with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to Ruth Ann.
Wow, humbled, honored, and thank you for those amazing, amazing words. And back at you, my friend, as a leader. So let's talk a little bit quickly about GHHI, but what I want to do is move to the reason we are here as quickly as I can. We may have some slides about this, but let me just, I think we can go to the next slide, but that is a beautiful picture of Latricia, who is still youthful, even as I've gotten older. To just know GHHI, and I'm going to move very quickly because appreciate the friendship from Latricia on her words. We are dedicated to addressing the social determinants of health, opportunity, and racial equity. We do that work through healthy housing and healthier communities. But the reason that we are here at this table today is we started as an organization with $17,000 collected together from putting that together from community and one employee to take on the issue of lead poisoning prevention in Baltimore City. Our mission has expanded across the nation, but we did that through partnership, through good allies, and through the ability to access funding. And we felt that our journey was one that would help inform finding and building and supporting the brilliance that exists in communities throughout Region 3 and throughout the nation. But we know that we have such a diverse and wonderful region, from coal country to the Chesapeake Bay, to urban settings, to rural farming, and so many issues that abound, including work in 7 tribal nations that we hope to include in our support through thriving communities. So I want to just go to whatever we have on the next slide and be able to get to talk about the 40 million that we're able to make. This is a little bit of our success and how we work, just for a moment, around our whole house work, and that we work throughout the country, not only in Region 3, but bringing a holistic answer. And we know there are holistic answers throughout, solutions that are on the ground that need the lift and need the amplification and need those initial resources. We have built a whole house approach, starting from lead and building out, because of that pathway, because of that journey. We're always happy to talk more about this, but let's get to the real work today. And I don't know what the next slide may be, Sarah. But I want to bring on Abby Kofsky, who is leading our efforts here as we advance these grant funds. And we will take the same approach as we give money and technical assistance to think about how do we align, grade, and coordinate not only our work that we do in the corpus of GHHI, but as we advance the Thriving Community Grants, we want to be thinking about how do we connect you to other funding? How do we help build the capacity of your organization to lead, to flourish, and to grow on the solutions necessary for our neighbors, our communities, and our families throughout the region. So let's go to the next slide. And it is my pleasure here to introduce Abby Kofsky, who is our Senior Vice President for Thriving Communities. She's going to take you through what we are putting out as an offering on grants. And we will talk about the depth of technical assistance that we will offer. I'll come back and join the team on the questions and answers. And I know we're going to encourage you to put questions into Q&A, and to also, if you didn't, introduce yourselves in the chat, where you're from and what are the issues that you're interested in. We want to use this as an opportunity to dialogue and learn as we expand our reach to become the most accessible and transparent grant program on behalf of the Environmental Protection Agency and Region 3. And we want to thank the Biden-Harris administration and Congress for making these funds available for community. So Abby, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Great. Thank you, Ruth Ann, and thank you to Latricia for such a warm welcome, setting the stage, and to my colleague, Sierra, for helping us manage the logistics. This is really an exciting moment for us, and if it hasn't been clearly stated already, this is a pre-launch webinar around the Thriving Communities funding that will be available for Region 3. And it's an opportunity for us to preview to all of you both the purpose of the funding, sort of the contours of the program, the specifics of the type of funding that will be available, as well as the eligibility and the application process. So as we move into the next couple of slides, I will warn you that we do get into some of the specifics, some details here. Given the number of folks that are on the phone, on the webinar, and the content we want to get through, I do want to encourage you that as questions come up for you to put them into that Q&A function. Our team will answer as we go in that Q&A dialogue box, and then we'll come back at the end. We're looking to save sort of really the last half an hour for discussion. But very pleased to have you all here. And as Ruth Ann said, feel free to introduce yourself, where you're coming to us from today, and the type of work that you're doing. We're really eager, as Ruth Ann said, to be in dialogue. And this slide here becomes a great starting place for us. What it does is it sort of grounds us in what is the Thriving Communities program and the grant-making program. It is part of a bigger national initiative being led by the EPA, coming out of the Inflation Reduction Act, to, in particular for this grant-making program, to reduce the barriers and make it easier, in particular for small community-based organizations, to access federal funding for environmental justice work. So that is our purpose. That's our North Star here. And today we're talking about the funding that's available for Region 3. And what I will just sort of say is we are one of 11 grant makers that are covering the country. So if you're calling in today, joining us from other regions, other parts of the country, know that there are similar grant making programs being stood up in those regions that will be coming online in the coming months. So happy to make connections there. And today our focus will be on Region 3. So we can move into the next slide. And if it hasn't sort of been clear, I'll connect the dots to say that GHHI is the grant maker. We went through the competitive process with EPA to be selected as the grant maker with lots of partners for the Region 3 area. And you can see here the states and the federally recognized tribes that make up Region 3. And as part of our charge, we will be making $40 million in grants to what we expect will be about 170 environmental justice projects across the region. And this is certainly about moving resources to organizations that are at the front lines of a whole range of environmental justice efforts. It is also about the type of technical assistance that Latricia talked about. So it's thinking about what is the technical assistance that is needed to help strengthen the organizations that are receiving the grants. What are sort of the ways that they need to grow as an organization? Where do they look for additional technical support? And also technical support on the types of projects that they're taking on. So we'll talk about that technical assistance program. We have some partners, incredible partners in place, but we also expect to see really grantee-driven technical assistance needs emerge, and being able to make those connections and collaborations to support the grantee efforts. The Thriving Communities program here, we do have an advisory board. Latricia is one of our advisory board members, and this is a really important part of our governance structure. You can see the representative organizations that are part of our advisory board, and they're playing a critical role for us in a couple of ways. One, in outreach and applicant engagement. This is a grant program where we really are trying to reach those that are at the front line of community environmental justice work. We want to reach beyond just the folks that have history and experience getting federal grants, beyond the usual suspects. And so their collaboration and partnership and promoting this opportunity is really critical for us. They're also helping us think about program design, technical assistance design, and throughout the process, making sure that as we move forward, and as we move forward in collaboration with EPA and our other partners, that we are mindful and centering principles around equity, transparency, again, throughout both the application, selection, award, and implementation process. So we're deeply grateful for them. And it really is an incredible group of regional leaders and organizations. Another important part, as we move to the next slide, of our infrastructure are our technical assistance partners. Here you can see several of the technical assistance partners that have joined us from the very get-go of this program. Howard University, Virginia Poverty Law Center, Delaware State University, and Children's National, all bringing a whole range of capacities and expertise. This group will grow throughout the process as we really work with grantees to identify what are the other types of technical assistance needs, who are the other partners that we need to be bringing to the table to support the work. And so this just gives you a sense of what our starting team and starting governance structure looks like. And with that, we can take a look now at really getting into sort of the core elements of the purpose, and want to talk here about these as sort of the critical principles that we're building on. And the first is that this is about focusing resources, federal resources, to benefit communities who have disproportionately been affected by environmental, climate, human health harms and risks. Many of you on the phone have likely know about sort of the notion of Justice 40, where 40% of resources are going into historically disinvested communities. The purpose of this program is really to move 100% of the resources into communities that are, by EPA sort of standards, disadvantaged, but the communities that we know, have faced the biggest barriers to health, well-being because of environmental injustices. So that is a core purpose for this work, and it's one that we're centering throughout the process. This is very much about, if we can go back, want to get through a couple of the other purpose elements. If not, we're moving forward. Great, thank you. So this is also about strengthening capacity, and want to just also recognize that we anticipate a lot of the organizations that will be applying for this funding opportunity have capacity, critical leadership roles to play in their communities. And this is an opportunity to strengthen that capacity, to see federal resources finally sort of move to recognize that capacity and to support the work that in some cases is already being being done, and to sort of help it grow and help it expand and really catalyze transformational effort. It is also about that connection, connecting community organizations with other technical assistance providers and resources that can support their work. And while, as this program is conceived of now, it is one-time funding. The hope is it can be catalytic for the organizations that are funded, and catalytic for the communities that the work is taking place in, really to see fundamental changes in the conditions of these communities and the opportunities, again, for health, for well-being, for clean and healthy environments where everybody can thrive. So this really, again, I want to just reinforce that these are critical building blocks for us, and as the program evolves. This is a slide that if you are from Wilmington, you might recognize. It is a snapshot of what is the EPA's disadvantaged communities map. And this is one of the ways that they are delineating and sort of identifying those communities with the biggest barriers to health, well-being, and clean environments. It is those communities that have been both overburdened by environmental injustices and underserved and underinvested in. And really the threshold for this program is to see that the funding is benefiting these communities. And so that will be an important part of the eligibility for the grant program. And so wanted to start here. There are links to this tool, obviously in the deck and in our materials, but this will be sort of a fundamental and foundational piece of the program criteria. As we move to the next slide, you can see the range of eligible applicants for the program. You've heard us talk a lot about this really being focused and centered on community-based organizations, grassroots organizations, community serving organizations. And so we name up front that nonprofit organizations are a primary applicant, as well as tribal governments, both federal and state recognized, intertribal consortium, other Native American organizations, as well as local government and institutes of higher education. I do want to acknowledge in these sort of last eligibility areas around local government and institutes of higher education, it's still coming back to that purpose of seeing this as an opportunity to really strengthen the capacity of community-based organizations, community serving efforts. And so that will be an important thing that we'll be looking for in those applications coming from partners in government and higher ed. This slide has a lot on it, and I know we're moving through this content really quickly, but there are two things to really lift up here when we talk about sort of the types of environmental justice issues that are likely to fall under this grant making. And the first is it's a broad list. This is an illustrative list. It is not intended to be complete. The other is this sort of tag at the bottom of the list here, which is sort of community-driven environmental justice priorities as being, what is driving, in some cases, the program plans and the applications, is really sort of lifting up what those priorities are in your communities, knowing that it could be anything from addressing air quality to thinking about environmental justice training for youth. So there's a whole range here of opportunity intended not to constrain you, but to be illustrative in showcasing the range. And again, that principle that it really is community driven. All right, so this is a slide that starts to get into some of the specifics of the grant awards and the ways that the grant awards are taking shape. So what you can see here is that there will be 3 tiers of grants that are made through this program. The first tier is an assessment projects that are earlier in their development, really focused on assessing, understanding environmental risk. We expect, and these really are expected numbers, they're not firm numbers, but it gives us a guidepost of how we anticipate the awards to flow. About 60, these are 1-year awards at $150,000. So that is our tier 1 grants. The tier 2 grants are planning projects. Anticipate about 50. These are larger. These are up to 250 and are between a year, 2-year period. So a longer period of time for that programming. And the third tier is our implementation, sort of demonstration implementation projects. Again, about 50 here, up to 350,000 for 2 years. So we'll talk a little bit more about what falls under these 3 different tiers, sort of what differentiates them, but want to just acknowledge that these will all be, when we release our request for applications, all of these tiers will be available at that time. I also want to call your attention to the last line here, which is the non-competitive capacity building. As part of the Thriving Communities Grant-Making Program, EPA has sort of called out the need for us to recognize that there will continue to be organizations that don't yet, or for a whole range of reasons, don't have the capacity to right now to apply to this type of competitive grant-making program. And so there will be 10 grants of $75,000 1 year that will go to what are considered by EPA to be sort of severely capacity constrained organizations. This right now is not part of the request for applications that is forthcoming. The criteria and the process for the non-competitive capacity building is something that we're actively discussing with our advisory board. So there'll be more to share on that in the future. Right now, as we're looking at the forthcoming request for applications, the focus will be on tiers 1, 2, and 3. So a little bit more about those. And this slide sort of takes those 3 tiers and it just gives, again, examples. We can go back. There we go. Thank you. Examples of the types of projects that might fall under these different tiers. Like the examples of sort of issues and topics to take on. This is intended to be illustrative. The other thing I want to just acknowledge sort of the macro level here is you see tier 1, you see tier 2, you see tier 3. It is not designed, the program's not designed, nor is it long enough at this point to move an applicant sort of into a grant, a tier 1, then a tier 2, then a tier 3. Rather, the tiers really recognize that community-based organizations, communities are at different levels of readiness for their work. And so the tiers really respond to communities that might be, or community-based organizations that are at the beginning, that sort of really need to understand, are looking to do more sort of diagnostic assessment, the type of sampling, testing, monitoring, community input, really that type of understanding engagement, sort of diagnostic, that is different than a community that has sort of identified a problem and opportunity and are really looking to do sort of the planning work and sort of planning work that might be really deeply dependent upon community engagement and partnership building, type of outreach and education training. It could also, include, and we note here that the funding can go into, things that might be small land purchase. You can see that's something that's part of both tier 2 and 3. But again, you get the sense that there's sort of the assessment in tier 1, the planning in tier 2, and then in tier 3 you see more of like what's considered development or implementation of those plans. This might be more technical development. It might be obtaining permits, again, that sort of notion of small land purchase or acquisition. So again, we know that this type of community change work is not linear. It doesn't always fall neatly into these different categories, but this is intended to sort of, again, give you a sense of how the differences in the award sizes, the award durations will play out, and the type of projects that are anticipated under each. We spoke to this, I spoke to this about the non-competitive grants and acknowledged that this is forthcoming. It's something that we're actively talking about with our board. I would encourage, if there are folks that are listening today, and as you look at the request for application when it comes out, and you look at it and you think, well, that's the type of work we aspire to do, we might not be ready, to reach out to the team to let us know. And then that's something we'll stay in active dialogue as the process for that funding gets refined with our advisory board. All right, so this gets into the request for applications. And the first thing to say, if anybody's sitting there saying, oh, I haven't seen the request for applications yet, it has not yet been released. We anticipate that the release will take place later this month. We'll give you lots of instructions on how to get information, how to stay informed. A lot of that's going to be on our website, signing up for alerts. But once the request for application is released, what you will see here are these submission deadlines. While the program will be accepting applications on a rolling basis, for the 2-year awards, it will be rolling until November 30th. For the 1-year awards, it will be rolling until April 30th, 2025. So I just want to pause on that. All of that will be in the request for applications. But what this timeline allows for is for both that rolling process, but it also recognizes that we're working within the duration of the grant program. And so to complete the grants within that time period, we need those 2-year grant awards to start earlier. And so again, those applications will need to be in by the end of November. The application materials, and again, as we go back to the purpose of the program, it really is to create an application process that is a lower barrier to entry when it comes to federal funding. So we're aspiring to make sure that the application process is transparent, that is accessible, and that there is, collecting the information that is necessary for thoughtful decision making, and of course for compliance with EPA, but not more than that, and really recognizing the time and the work that communities and community-based organizations are putting into these applications, and wanting to really think about how we sort of hold those principles of environmental justice in that process. When the request for application goes live, we'll be directing folks to what is an online platform for submission. The access to that platform will be on the Thriving Communities section of the GHHI website. There will be a mail-in option, and we'll be sharing that for folks that might not have consistent access to the online portal. And the expectation is, and this is a place where I think we anticipate making feedback to make sure we're aligned, is that the application will take about 4 to 8 hours. I think we jumped ahead on a slide, but we can stay here and just talk about, okay. So again, the application will take about 4 to 8 hours. And the other thing to really acknowledge is that there will be multiple different types of supports throughout the process. And we'll talk about, again, what those supports are, especially for anybody that might, be seeing the application materials, that might be seeing the requirements, and again, feeling like that's too big of a lift. And I really want to assure you that part of the goal here is to offer the support to make sure that it is accessible, and that you feel like you have, again, the tools, the guidance to be able to move forward with that application. We can now go to the next slide. This starts to give you a sense of what is required in that application. There will be a narrative proposal that is no more than 7 pages. We know even that is not an insignificant commitment, but this is an opportunity for the applicant to lay out the community context, history, needs, priorities, assets, to talk about the proposed project and the activities and partners that might be involved. but also the individual organizational capacity, projected, technical assistance needs, knowing those might change over the duration of the project, but start to lay that out, as well as early thinking on, evaluation in terms of like, what does success mean for your organization? And again, you'll see when the request for application goes out, there's guiding questions that help folks think about how they will complete that section. There is a requirement for a budget. There will be a template that is provided that you can use unless you have other budget templates that you've used for the project that you prefer. So again, there's some tools there to help. Otherwise, if there's a project budget you're using, that will be acceptable and can be uploaded into the system. Same for a work plan. An optional template will be provided, but you're able to upload a work plan that might already exist. We will be asking for financial statements, a most recent statement. We do recognize that, especially for maybe those tier 1, so folks that are earlier in their work, there might not be an audit or financial statement. And that's a place, again, where we really want to have the conversation and think about what other supporting documents could then be provided. And if folks do have an A133 audit, that certainly should be submitted. So this is what rounds out the core application. We also recognize that in some cases, folks have more or other ways to share their work. And so the application system will allow you to share what we're considering to be optional materials. And when we say optional, we really mean optional. There's no penalty for anyone who doesn't submit these, but we want to just acknowledge that if you are in a position where you want to bring voice, or you have videos that really help capture your community, and you want to sort of provide a link to a YouTube video, that is acceptable. What I would say is we're not encouraging folks to go out and hire a video crew to create some high production material. This is iPhone level, voices, perspective, or something that might already exist. It is optional. And again, can help just bring other perspective, other voice to the written narrative. And we have space for folks to provide up to 3 additional project-related documents. And this, again, is providing maybe context, providing some evidence, if it's a research, if it's a planning or implementation phase, maybe there is some assessment product that helps sort of showcase how the project's been evolving. This is also a space where folks have a logic model that they want to share. If they are applying with several partners and there is perhaps an MOU or sort of an articulation of how the partners work together, that very much is acceptable. And lastly, again, especially if an organization is applying on behalf of a partnership or coalition and you want to bring forward letters of support, there's a space for you to do that. And I would say, we're not looking for folks to sort of hit a check the box requirement with, a form letter, but if there are letters that really are important in articulating the nature of your collaboration, expressing those commitments that you think is important for folks who are reviewing to understand, those are welcome. So again, just reinforcing that this gives you some other forums, other methods to share about the work, but they are optional. This comes, again, right from the request for applications, and is intended to, again, give you a picture of what will sort of be asked for in the application and how the scoring, sort of what reviewers sort of will be attending to in the scoring. So within the application, again, asking you to talk about your community, both the needs, the assets, a description of the project. Again, we talked about that, your organizational capacity and or partner capacity and needs, sort of the preliminary thinking on evaluation plan as well as budget. Here you can see suggested lengths, they are suggested, and the points that are available for each section. Again, when you see the request for application, what you'll see is that for each of these areas, there are guiding questions that will help you sort of put the application together. And we talked obviously sort of about the review process. Sort of big picture, you know, our goal is that the time between an application being submitted and the review and the award to get under agreement is no more than 3 months. So that's the goal that we're striving for. When an application is first submitted, it will go through sort of what we're calling a threshold criteria sort of check. And that will happen within the first sort of 15 days of receipt. That's looking to make sure the applicant is eligible, that all the materials were submitted. If everything is not there, you will hear back from us about what's missing, what might need to be corrected, so you can move forward in the process. But it's important for you to know that, like, again, we want everyone to be successful. So if we find we're not getting complete information, we're going to come back to you. The eligible applications will move then into a full review. The full review will include a set of sort of external reviewers, inclusive of the Thriving Communities team, technical assistance providers, other environmental justice experts. And we expect, again, that will be done. And at that point, recommendations will be made about whether or not to sort of move a proposal forward to funding or not. And in cases where a proposal is not recommended for funding, there will be the opportunity for feedback. And I really want to emphasize this because I know this differentiates this from a lot of other federal programs. So if a proposal doesn't move forward, someone on the team will be able to provide feedback. And you will then have the opportunity to, assuming the program is still open and funds are available, to reapply based on that feedback. So I want to just acknowledge that that is also part of the process. All right, so in terms of, again, what to expect and the types of supports that are available, our Thriving Communities website, the GHHI website, is really going to be the home for signing up for updates, including the update on the announcement and release of the request for applications, which we expect will be coming out later this month. We will be posting and regularly updating a frequently asked questions document, inclusive of some of the questions that might come up today and those that come up throughout the process. Whenever we get an applicant question that is applicable to everyone, we're really committed to then sort of providing that question and that answer to everyone, so everyone benefits from that. We will be, again, hosting applicant webinars and applicant office hours starting in late August and September. Again, really being there to help you navigate the process, the eligibility, the online system, and encourage folks, as we said in the beginning, to reach out to us with questions throughout. I also want to acknowledge that we're not the only ones that are here to help and support and that are rooting for the success of environmental justice organizations across the region. And if we go to the next slide, I want to just acknowledge the Region 3 sort of TICTAC, which is the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. This is an important part of the infrastructure that EPA has created with not just the grant makers, but also the technical assistance providers. In Region 3, that is led by the National Wildlife Federation, the University of Maryland, and a set of other hubs and partners. And they're able to provide technical assistance on a whole range of funding opportunities related to environmental justice and environmental justice efforts more generally, but including Thriving Communities. And this is a place where, as the grant maker, we can't get into sort of some of the program design, application preparation, sort of to maintain a bit of a firewall in that process, but the TICTAC is really there to provide that more sort of content specific guidance and support. We've provided their contact information here and just acknowledge it's an incredible resource for the region. So that really, brings us, to the end of the formal presentation. I do want to just acknowledge that we covered a lot of ground, a lot of details, but hopefully it gives you the contours of the program, what's important in the program, and hopefully you heard a real commitment from us to provide support throughout the process. So I think at this point we can probably take down the slides. We can bring any of them back up if needed. I see my colleagues coming back on the screen. And
Boy,
also,
I tell you, Abby, a lot of information covered, a lot of amazing questions. And I was trying to do my part to help welcome people. If you haven't gotten your welcome yet, you'll hear from us. Abby, what a great job. I know we have a lot of questions to get to, some amazingly good questions that were posed, and just really great coverage throughout the region. If I could ask a couple of things or say a couple of quick things at the top to answer one general question, which is we are sharing these slides. We're going to email them out to registrants. They'll be on the website. We ask you to share what you've learned today. And we have a lot of questions around eligibility, types of projects, who can apply. So I think Beth and Sarah, and you've been watching that, and let's get to them. But again, Abby, what a great job to cover all of that.
Thank you, Ruth Ann. So I just wanted to do a quick introduction of Beth Bingham, our VP of Communications, who is also helping us on the Thriving Communities Initiative. She will help facilitate the Q&A section. Thank you very much, Beth, and I'll turn it over to you.
You
All
are
right,
very,
Oprah, let's go.
You are very welcome. Great to have everybody here. So I've been grabbing the questions. Some of them have been answered in the Q&A, and then some are still outstanding. So I'm just going to toss them out to my colleagues. And Ruth Ann, Abby, Dawn, whomever is the right person to answer, I will trust you to jump in. So the first question, are national nonprofit organizations eligible?
Dawn or Abby, do you want to take that, or you want me to jump in?
go ahead, we can fill in.
National nonprofits can be part of a application, but we are looking for community-based environmental justice efforts that are happening on the ground, benefiting directly the EPA identified disadvantaged communities. The goal and purpose of these funds is to build the capacity of grassroots organizations, of community-based organizations, and be focused on solutions in disadvantaged communities. But I'll defer to my colleagues here on anything else on that.
Okay. All right. The next question, is a local school district considered a local government agency for the purposes of the grant program?
That's an excellent question. I mean, I know that as we've looked at, there is a formal definition that comes out of the EPA regulations that we can get back to. It has included cities, towns, public housing authorities. I would be inclined to say yes, but I want to come back to that answer with something more definitive, unless any of my colleagues know. Great question, though. Really appreciate it.
Okay, well, I'm going to highlight that one for follow-ups. We will make sure that we don't forget to get back to that. Okay, the next question, does electronic recycling qualify? We have a program that provides transitional employment for justice-impacted individuals to learn how to recycle electronics, and wondering if we qualify for this program.
I did think I had answered that, but maybe I didn't hit the send. It has to be coming from an eligible entity, have an environmental justice purpose, which it sounds like it does, and benefiting a disadvantaged community. Thought it was a great question. Apologies if I didn't hit send on that. And we encourage further questions if you have them on that.
Okay. And then this question came in a few times. Are grantee applicants eligible for both the tiered and non-competitive capacity building grants? And I'm going to connect to that a question that came in a few times about, can entities apply for more than one tier of funding?
Sure. So, and an applicant could apply for more than one tier of funding. So that is feasible. We have said, and we will restate that no organization would receive more than 2 grants. So that is just a recognition of, the broad set of need and opportunity in reaching a wide range of community-based organizations. I would say that at this point, there are 10 grants for the capacity constrained organizations. And I think if an organization had the capacity to sort of be competitive for tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, that sort of defeats the purpose, I think, of those capacity constrained grants. So we would not imagine at this point, initially, a capacity constrained organization applying for both. The exception could be if they sort of receive that capacity constrained award early in the process, right? So that 1-year grant happens early and there is still funding available for maybe potentially phase 1 or phase 2 once that award is completed. That would be eligible. And I think what we can do is we can provide a little bit more specificity on that, because I think that is a question that will likely come up for even tier 1 recipients, right? If we get a tier 1 grant early on, can we then apply for tier 2? At this point, it is feasible. The timing might not work in everybody's favor given sort of the duration there, but and the last thing that I want to say is that wasn't the intent. I want to come back to that there wasn't sort of an intent or design to move folks from phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3. So we can provide a little bit more clarity in writing on that, but I welcome my colleagues to chime in if they want to round that up.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, depending on when the advisory board starts to move on, and no pressure, but on the unrestricted grants, that will be under the purview of the advisory board. But if you have an assessment project and that assessment in its scope really is completed in a manner that is within the 3 to 6 month period, it is likely or feasible that you could apply to go to the higher level or other funding. The key there is completing what has been applied for and being able to move to that, or have a strategy within your community where you have multiple applicants that maybe are aligned in efforts. We want to make sure that we are obviously getting out this money to really important projects, and collaboration is going to be very key as it is in getting things accomplished. So Dawn, I didn't know if you had more to add on that.
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right.
So,
go ahead.
No, it's okay. Go ahead, please.
Are the deadlines that were shown on the screen to receive all applications?
So the deadlines we showed on the screen were broken out by 2-year awards and 1-year awards. And so all 2-year awards would need to be in by November 30th. And all 1-year awards would need to be in by April 30th, 2025. The piece that's, I think, important to note is that we expect to announce the awards in batches. They'll be reviewed again in a rolling manner, and we expect to announce I think it's every other month starting, likely in December. It will depend when the first grants come in. But what that means is that we'll announce sort of like a first tranche of awards in December. And when we make that announcement, the other thing that we'll be doing is sharing, like on the website, sort of the overall sort of where we are in terms of availability for additional funding. As we said, we don't know totally what to expect in terms of the pace at which applications will come in. But after we make that sort of first tranche of awards, again, likely in December, we'll then let folks know about how much is then available for subsequent rounds. And then an additional sort of tranches would be announced about every 2 months after that. So that is the anticipated plan. That level of detail will be in our frequently asked questions. But again, at this point for folks to know is if you're thinking about a 2-year award, it is going to need to be in no later than November 30th of this year, and the 1-year awards no later than April 30th. The caveat there is that if the funding moves more rapidly, you know, there will be a potential that there is not awards going out at the very end. And that is why it's going to be really important for us to be sort of clear and transparent about where that that is on our website once the program is launched.
Let me, if I can, add a little bit more, because I know there's always the, wanting to make sure that we are reaching organizations that haven't been reached before. We are doing all that we can to build capacity of those that are really constrained on resources or haven't had the access to resources, and we're paying attention to that. We do have contractual deadlines to meet within the EPA federal grants and the way that Congress set up timelines on this and the way that's done through the funding mechanisms. I want to stress, if I can, as the funding goes out, there will also be a very deep bench of responsive technical assistance. And Abby went through some of our awarded technical assistance partners, including Howard, Delaware State, Virginia Poverty Law Center, and the Children's Hospital Network. But we have the ability to bring in up to 18 other technical assistance providers. So we've held funds to inform and assist organizations in building deeper capacity based on the issues that are of need to them, whether it's I think there was a question around lead and water, or if it's developing clean energy strategies in coal country or doing river runoff issues. It could also be in board building or organizational development. So we're trying to work all of these things within what is admittedly federal guidance and federal timeframes. And we also know that there's going to be an extraordinarily strong demand for the funds. And we have had a lot of internal conversations and thoughtfulness around, and with our advisory board too, around making sure that we have a good pace on this and that we're paying attention to really get to those organizations of great need as much as possible. So I appreciate the questions that have come in around that.
Okay, next question. How is this organization ensuring its funding, job opportunities, and remediation projects are going to communities and organizations that have not previously had access to funding? What about organizations that are currently underfunded?
I mean, I think that it's an important question, and I think it speaks to the purpose of the program. So when we think about some of both the eligibility, right, sort of making sure that the funds are benefiting sort of what has been sort of recognized as sort of overburden and underinvested communities, that is a threshold. I will say on that, obviously we're using the EPA's disadvantaged communities map. That is a data point. It's a quantitative set of data that are important And we're looking for the application to provide additional context, right? The sort of the qualitative, the storytelling, sort of the understanding about sort of why either the organization or the community, what that reality is, and sort of what the implications in some case of historic disinvestment has meant in terms of the ability to be effective in addressing environmental issues. I think the other thing is we are asking applicants to talk about their history with past federal funding. We ask it not as a requirement, right? We're not looking for folks to say, hey, have experience managing federal funds. In fact, we're looking to see that this is an opportunity that benefits, in some cases, folks that have never sort of received federal funding. And that goes again to the purpose. This is really trying to build the muscles and the skills and the processes of organizations. So after this, they're better prepared to think about federal, state, private funding, and having the sort of infrastructure and systems to be effective at that.
I would, I encourage Latricia and Dawn, anytime, jump in too. Go ahead, Dawn.
Yeah, I was going to actually come behind that, Ruth Ann, and appreciate you touching on that, Abby. I think it's really important for those that are reapplying to understand that this is intentionally seeking a community conversations, or seeking community members to name those well-deserving organizations that may have a barrier to entry. We recognize that many federal initiatives don't even get presented to those individuals. They're not in meetings, they're not in rooms, they're not even being named in conversations where they have should have access. And so we are actually going on this 30-town tour with the intention of being in communities where individuals who would not be invited to speak, would not have the visibility as a national organization or educational institution or university. And I think one of the big things that makes me really proud about the work of GHHI is that we've already been working in community. So there's already been an intentional effort to be accessible and to bring programs like this to community. But in addition to, we need your support. Certainly reach out to our team to make sure that we have information around businesses and organizations in your community that are doing the work and really have been overlooked in the past. And so we would really love your partnership on that in every way possible. But thank you in advance for everything that you're going to do to help us make this more accessible to the community.
Thank you,
If
Dawn.
I may just
Latricia.
okay, thank you for catching that.
Thank you.
Okay.
Hang on, Latricia. You have you're on mute. There you go. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to just very quickly add, sorry for the sirens in the background if you can hear it, but I also just wanted to add on to that response to that question, is that with this Thriving Communities program, what makes it powerful is that GHHI kind of stands as the liaison between a lot of the logistical and kind of tedious aspects of federal grants. Like they're doing that administrative side, right? So that it can be more accessible to those community-based organizations that do not have a history of having federal grant funding. And in addition to that, may literally not have capacity. So that's the beauty of this project or this program, is that as a community-based organization, you literally just focus on doing the work. And kudos to GHHI, who will stand in to fulfill some of those very tedious requirements that are often associated with federal grant management. So just wanted to add that part in there as well. So I mentioned earlier about that technical assistance. That is a key component, is that as a recipient, you won't have the same requirements that GHHI would have as the grant maker themselves, if that makes sense. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Can more than one local environmental justice organization / community participate in a joint application for a larger project they are participating in, or should those be separate applications?
Dawn, you want to take that?
Yeah, they would be separate applications. And then I want to also emphasize that you can have organizations that are applying for different tiers. So you can have an organization that may be working in a partnership that may be applying for tier 1 and then applying as an individual entity as a tier 2 project. So again, the tiers provide a lot of diversity in application submission and will allow you to have kind of a mix of partnership as well as individual submission opportunities.
We also, I think, Abby and Dawn, everyone, we also encourage collaboration, organizations going in together. Is that right? So, but it's a both and in that one, right? For sure. I want to thank the people who put up the EPA disadvantaged communities map, and I love the weigh-in happening on in the chat or Q&A here.
What are the reporting and audit implications and stipulations surrounding these federal funds? Is this funding from the EPA directly, or do nonprofits report to GHHI, who then reports to EPA? Some organizations do not have the capacity to receive federal funds directly.
Abby,
So, I'm sorry. So for organizations that will be submitting their applications, if you're referring to your reporting requirements, you'll be reporting to GHHI. GHHI is the grant maker for this initiative, and you will have the Flux Grant Management System where you'll be submitting your applications. And in that portal, you'll have the opportunity for not only submission of applications, receiving your award, but also being guided through the reporting and impact and assessment questions that we'll have around your actual project. So everything will live in a grants management system, and it'll be highly intuitive, and you'll be able to use that system to upload any data that you might need around your reporting, but it will live with the in the Flux system that GHHI will manage and work with you with your organization throughout the process for application and reporting opportunities.
And sort of related.
Sorry,
go ahead.
if I could just add on to that, as people are doing this, these are reimbursable. When you something to know, they are reimbursable. You can invoice us frequently, and we will turn that around as quickly as EPA turns it around. And I will say their ASAP system is very efficient. We will be there to help you to ensure you have the assistance and support for the billing process. But it is also, as you do this work, it's a reimbursable. Some things that we are looking at, besides the fact that we are looking at how do we bring to the attention all of our applicants and awardees proposals to philanthropy, to places like healthcare and other ways of foundation and private sector and state and local funding. But we're also thinking about this reimbursement issue that happens on the front end for severely constrained organizations. And we are trying to work for solutions on that where possible. Some communities are already working with us to look at those solutions. And if we are able to point you in the direction of getting additional upfront monies, we will be doing that as well. So thank you for letting me add into that.
All right. As it seems like the rolling deadline risks that lower capacity groups that may take longer to organize their application may miss out on funding. Will certain funds be held for grants later in the year?
Abby, you want to, I know we've discussed this a lot.
Yeah, no, so that is, I will say, one of the things that keep us up at night is that. And it is, I think, one of the tensions that we're working through with our advisory board in terms of how do we hold true to sort of the criteria for both individual, sort of the process for individual scoring, but also looking holistically at the distribution of the 171 grants and making sure that they are sort of reflecting the principles of the program. So the ways that we're thinking about that now might also then require us to adjust some of the expectations that we're setting. So I'll just say that transparently here, that while we're hoping that all grants are sort of made within that 3-month period, What we might find is a need to sort of put some grants in a holding pattern. So we do have the time to then sort of realize that sort of equitable distribution. And so I say that that is something that we're building in, not fully knowing, what the application pace will look like early on. But your point's incredibly well taken, and it's been a central discussion point with our advisory board. Others should weigh in, but I really appreciate it.
No, I think that's right. It is as I was trying to get to earlier, it's the balance of trying to meet we are required as a federal grantee here to meet deadlines and try to pursue the mission here and push as hard as we can on that. It is also why we are looking to build philanthropic interest in these proposals, because we anticipate also that we will get far more proposals than we're able to fund, far more brilliant ideas than we're going to be able to fund. And so we are consciously working now to be able to build the network and the process to give exposure and interest. And we've had a number of philanthropic affinity networks reach out to us in the region who are interested in knowing about these projects. And so we're hopeful to not just use this as a base on which we build and pay attention to those issues. As I said in the opening, GHHI in 1993 had $17,000 to work with to tackle the issue of lead poisoning and the toxic legacy of lead in Baltimore, one employee. So while we have many organizations that probably are going to come in with having no funding and using this as an opportunity to move forward, we have great thoughtfulness about the experience needed to build capacity, the time it takes, and that's not done overnight. As an organization, we are very clear that we are going to stand with communities to not get rolled past in all of the large federal funds that are coming to communities, and ensure that we do our best to be partners in making sure that we get as much in community and as deep as we can for long-term resiliency of organizations.
Okay. All right, there's a couple questions on this, on can a project be eligible if it doesn't fall within the EPA IRA disadvantaged communities map? Can lower income projects in other areas qualify? And the example given on the Eastern Shore of Maryland, the map does not accurately reflect what we see on the ground. So does it have to be in one of the disadvantaged communities on the EPA map?
Let me jump in, and then please others follow. One, we can work with you to bring that to the attention of the EPA and the people who are driving the map and driving that data. And they are continually evolving that map. Recently just released a new iteration that captured more communities that we also thought needed to be in there, and not only our voice, but many others on that. We're going to go a lot of places where data has not been collected because no one's been listening, communities that have not been seen. We will help you get connected to the right people at the EPA on that. But we are focused on those communities that are identified as disadvantaged communities. I don't know if the team wants to add more on that.
Okay. Question here for tribal communities. Are there any barriers to projects focused on Indigenous and tribal communities working on rematriation and care of open spaces within their communities?
Abby, you want to go?
Yeah, I was going to say, based on the question, that feels eligible, but I think would require, having a little more discussion and sort of understanding the context in an application. But based on that, I don't hear any reason that would not be eligible.
Yeah, we're the seven tribal communities and more in the region. We're very pleased to have Virginia Humanities on our advisory board, helping us to connect, hear from, and provide access to those communities as well.
There was a clarifying question. Somebody was looking for clarifying. Does GHHI work as a fiscal manager, meaning they will receive the actual funds and that draws are then made through them? Somebody just wanted clarification on that, please.
Dawn, do you want to answer that?
Yes, so GHHI will have a drawdown system, and so that's what Ruth Ann was referring to when she was talking about the reimbursable payments. There will be a drawdown system from the EPA. Those funds will be then dispersed to those that are awarded the funding. And so for the applicants who have had federal funds before, they may understand what a draw is, and that's basically the funds coming down through the EPA to the grant maker that are then dispersed to community. So yes, the answer to the question is yes.
Given the political climate and possible shifts, it seems there is a desire to push these funds out quickly. Maybe the intentions around tiers and capacity constrained grants should be revisited. So not really a question, a statement. I don't know if anybody wanted to respond to that because I think that has come up before as well.
Yeah, I think we've kind of responded to that pretty thoroughly, but again, we are trying to have the balance of getting the funding out so that as organizations get funding, there's a longer period of time to provide technical assistance, capacity building, bring attention for other potential funding, but pace that as well to give organizations that are more resource constricted the opportunity to build their proposal and to work. So we are working very hard on that balance. We are continually discussing that. We're getting input on that, and I think we've kind of answered that before, and happy to also remind people that they can reach out to us at thrivingcommunities@ghhi.org. We'll happily set up one-on-ones to answer questions. And we, as I said, we know that while 40 million sounds like a lot of money, it's not even the tip of the iceberg. You know, we've been at 2 events in 2 communities, and I felt like it could all go in one community. So we are going to be very careful about pace, about topic, about regional distribution, and try our very best. I think we have a great reputation in our work to reach that balance, and we are really grateful for the input and feedback that we're getting here, so that we can continue to put our best minds on that.
Okay. I think we have time for one more before we wrap up. There's one. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, how might a state agency partner with institutions providing PA and funding to local communities impacted by environmental, social, economic, and racial injustice? So how might a state agency partner?
I'm happy to start. Well, I think one, really appreciate the question, because I think this is an opportunity that requires obviously not just the support to sort of individual community-based organizations, but the opportunity to sort of strengthen the whole ecosystem, and state government partners are an important part of that. So at the get-go, I mean, it certainly means helping promote this opportunity. I think in places we have heard that there are some state offices that actually have technical assistance resources available that could potentially be valuable on the front end with communities that might be looking to sort of ready themselves for application. And I think the other opportunity for us is, as we identify and work with a set of both grantees and applicants, having open lines of dialogue around sort of what's being learned, what the needs are. And I think Latricia spoke really nicely that about sort of the potential role that we can play in being a bridge between what's happening in the ground and other sort of actors, whether it's state government, federal government, and really lifting up what the barriers are, what the needs are. And so I think if we have state partners that want to come to the table and listen and think about how their resources can respond, I think that is a huge opportunity. And I see, Latricia, you have your hand up, so welcome you to add in here.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that, and thank you for sharing that. Something that I have experienced with GHHI as well is strategizing around who the best players, I guess is the best word to use, as stakeholders to engage, whether that's local, whether that is state, whether that's federal, whether it's an agency versus like another organization. They've been instrumental to us as an organization to be able to navigate that, and even doing like a handoff to make those connections to those respective entities that you may not already have a relationship with. So can definitely attest to that personally with our organization being a resource that GHHI has been able to provide. And excited to hear and see that would be something that's extended to those who are within the program as well.
Yeah, can I get back to one thing? Because I'm seeing on the chat here about national nonprofits and local nonprofits and the like. I want to just emphasize our goal here is to lift community-based organizations, environmental justice, grassroots organizations, efforts that are in community where people are on the ground, understand more deeply than anyone the problems and the likely solutions that are at hand. And our goal is to really build the capacity of these organizations, and to really also just be clear, we are going to be working in the EPA disadvantaged communities, meaning applications have to really demonstrate or convey that it will benefit disadvantaged communities. And so we will happily talk further about this, but this is really intended in that spirit and in that goal and in the mission of environmental justice, capacity building, advancing equity. And I also want to encourage applicants to tell their story about their resources and lack of resources and their history there. And do not fold a tent and go away if you think because you have not have been resourced that you're not eligible. We want to help organizations stand up and move forward. So please be in touch with our team. We have an incredible team, deeply dedicated working on this. So I again want to just encourage everyone to be in touch with us if you have questions throughout the process, to take advantage of the technical assistance, Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Center. They're in Region 3, the National Technical Assistance Tech providers, which we're happy to also get you in touch with. And to note, as Abby did, there is also a national grant maker in addition to us and in addition to the technical assistance centers. So we'll help you be in touch with all of that work or all of those resources as we move forward together. I want to also, if I can, just thank the incredible team here for this, and to say that we will get to every question. I think we're going to be able to do that offline, see where they're coming from, get back to you. And I want to say again, I tried to give a welcome to everybody in the Q&A as I could fast type. If I didn't, I want to thank everybody who's given your time, your ear, your advice, and your feedback to this process as we move forward together.
Thank you, Ruth Ann, and thank you everyone again for attending. We will be sending out more information with answers to your questions, facts and FAQ, as well as information for how to access the recording. So please keep an eye out. And if you have any questions, again, thrivingcommunities@ghhi.com, and we'll be happy to respond to you then. So I will say, unless anybody else has something to add, thank you and good afternoon to everyone.
Thank you.